Mm-mm-mm. Hey, where's our? Is this mid-tempo music for Grapevine?
Divine. No, I don't know.
I mean for Freshly Pressed.
I don't know.
Hey, let me not go and play the wrong one.
Yes, yes. Well
We have
done.
to wait until it went on. Ayo, you're not helping much.
Because
Studio, bring us in.
good morning, Lagos, and thank you very much for staying tuned to Smooth 98.1. It's time for us to go through today's national news headline stories with our guest in the studio. I'm Ayo Mairo Ese.
And I'm Mazino Appeal.
Right, we have joining us this morning, Gbolahan. Morning, Gbolahan.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Mazino.
Good morning, Gbolahan.
And
How you
good
doing?
morning, Lagos. I'm very well.
Good to have you on the show. Gbolahan is at MrGQuest on Twitter, and we have Devoe. Morning, Devoe.
Good morning, Lagos. A cool flight diversion.
Thank you. At least your flight wasn't diverted this morning or your vehicle. Thank you very much, Devoe. Devoe is at Devoe Okorie. You can find him on Twitter and engage with him online. You can find us on Twitter at smooth981fm. Use the hashtag freshlypressed981. Also, you can send us your message to WhatsApp 0809 Streaming live on YouTube handle smooth981fm Lagos.
All right, so Devo, I'm not going to come to you with the flight diversion story just yet, but let's start with this one here. From the Vanguard newspaper this morning, minimum wage, VAT, Okada ban, pressure, inflation. Nigeria is recording its fifth consecutive month rise in January 2020 reading for inflation. Now, the MBS on Tuesday, they report that they indicated that the 6 month straight rise would hit 12.32% by the end of this month. They give factors as the implementation of the 30,000 naira national minimum wage, value added tax at 7.5%, ban of Okadas and tricycles in Lagos State. I think somewhere there says something about the border closure, but we have another story about that. So, Devo, first off, let's take us through all the technicalities of this because there's so many numbers and figures and factors that are mentioned inside of the story here.
Right, we'll make it very simple. It's
Okay.
actually an update on the economic position, and this is an indicator of growth where you speak of inflation, and inflation is usually the rise in prices. Okay, now the inflationary trend has been on a 6 month high, meaning it has been increasing month on month. Just between January to February, it's increased by 0.8%. That's nearly 1%. Now, and this is nationwide. And well, we have what we refer to as cost push inflation. Well, let's just leave that terminology. However, what that means is that once different fundamentals or policies are pushed in one way or the other, you're going to see an increase, and which is where they have listed some of the reasons that adduce or the reasons for the inflation. One, or the 5 month high. One of them, the border closure, as you know. Once things are prevented from coming in, it means the few things that are left behind, there's going to be a chase for them, right? So there's an increase coming from there. And you know all the stuff that we couldn't get, e.g., RISE, RICE, rice. Even local rice went
You
up.
could call it Irisi.
Yeah, from 8,000 to I think it's now selling at 25,000 per bag thereabouts. Then we also have the 30,000 minimum wage, which was passed by the presidency last year, which the federal government started, and then many states have started to some level. The consequential adjustment has been still in the pipeline. Well, that simply means more expense for governments to pay off. So that's also going to drive inflation because many people might want to take advantage of that, especially when it comes to consequential adjustments. Also, the rise in VAT, that's value added tax, moved from 5% to 7.5%. So businesses will have to pay more for certain items, even though some items are excluded from it. Two, the low interest rates. Okay, the CBN did shift on their monetary policy recently, and some people will take advantage of that.
Definitely.
And then in the immediate, which is where they mentioned the Lagos State restriction on Okada and bike riders. Remember, Lagos represents about 60% of the economy in this country. So if anything happens in Lagos, it's obviously going to affect the nation as a whole. And because Okadas and kekes have not been available, the few, even the hill riders are going through their little stress here. The transporters have seen an increase in their pricing.
Let me cut in here with Prince's question on WhatsApp. He asks, how can Okada ban in 5 local government areas and started on February 4th in Lagos be the cause of inflation in months of January?
Yes, and like I mentioned, this is an immediate issue. It just started. So it's not giving you reasons for why it's been on a 5-month high. This is only coming in recently. Two, people must take into cognizance that the 15 local governments that were restricted are the key core commercial local governments, like Ikeja, Etiosa, VI, Apapa, what do you call it?
You mentioned the entire
Yes, true. Now, it would seem that most of these policies and regulations all seem to happen at the same time. Did we not foresee that this was going to cause some sort of inflation? Okay, let me take it back. Did the government not foresee that this could cause some sort of inflation?
Well, foresight and government should not be in the same state.
Ooh,
okay, fine. So let's get that out. Now, they've also did mention that incoming is an increase in electricity tariffs, which should hit us around April, whereby the subsidy from government will be lifted and we will see an increase in our electricity prices. So what this means is that things are going to be on the high side for a little while coming. Wow. The advice is that we look for revenue generation, meaning in how many ways can you make money to be able to pay your bills. At the same time, you check where you're spending. That's for government in raising their own money to be able to meet up with their obligations. Likewise, the private sector, you and me, profit for businesses and also employment for workers. So government needs to really do a lot of work to ensure that they enable business, or what we refer to as ease of doing business, so that we're not, because you cannot be charging on every side. At the end of the day, choke us, as they say in the local language. People need to survive, but this is the status as of now.
But MI from Coca is just highlighting what you mentioned. Says we say we want to achieve a single-digit inflation, but our policies are heading in the opposite direction. Right. We now have a lot of negative real returns on certain investment. Curious to hear CBN's view on the 6-month rule. Echo single digits. Thanks, MI.
Let's move on to the next story. Yes. All right. This is from the Daily Times newspaper. I'm still going to come to you, Devoe, for this one. Okay. Let's move on to one for Gbolahan. Then let's talk about. Hang on, I got my script. So found it. Let's start from the New Telegraph here. Border closure. Nigeria now earns 11 billion naira daily. This actually flows right from out of your story, Devoe. Now, the Nigerian Customs Service has disclosed that the Nigerian economy now earns about 11 billion naira. Further down the story, it actually told that from before we were earning somewhere around 40 million to 45 million daily, but now we're earning in the billions. So the Comptroller General, Nigeria Customs Service, Colonel Hamid Ali, made this disclosure in Lagos at the Chamber of Commerce and Industry Center for International Private Enterprise. So this is a good thing. But I'm asking, how can you and I actually, or where do we see the indicators of this good thing?
Well, I mean, just as you said, this ties in very well with the story that Devoe was just talking about now, where we're relating it to the inflation that we're seeing in Nigeria at the moment now. And of course, this is all as the generation that the government is making now, which the Comptroller General of the Customs has said that Nigeria is now generating 11 billion naira on a daily basis from the port. And the reason for this generation now, or the increase in generation from 5 billion naira that they were generating as at end of last year compared to what they're generating now, and 40 to 45 million before the border closure, is because of the borders that were closed. So what has now happened is that, of course, a lot of all the imports that used to go through the Cotonou and the land borders are now all being channeled through the sea borders now. And invariably, the Nigerian government is generating a lot more in taxes through the waterways now. Of course, that it raises a lot of questions then. And the question that is raising is that when these goods were coming in initially through Cotonou and the other neighboring countries into Nigeria through the land borders, was the customs not generating enough revenue at that point in time? Why? For who? Yeah, well, exactly. Why weren't the customs generating all that much money? Because at the end of the day, we should have customs agencies, borders too, and of course, we should be generating money. But if we look at it, well, it would be said that a lot of all the imports that were coming through the land borders were being smuggled into the country, and as such, Nigeria was losing a lot of revenues from through the borders. And so since the border has now been closed, we're suddenly raising a lot of revenue. All well and good that the customs and Nigerian government is generating 11 billion now versus the 5 billion that they used to generate. But there are several issues that goes beyond what the government is generating. I mean, government is not the only driver of Nigeria's economy. With at last count, when you look at the GDP figures, I mean, the impact of government in GDP figures, it will probably amount to probably between 5 to 10% or so. The private sectors play a very, very major role in driving the economy. Absolutely. And now when we're now talking about government generating 11 billion alone, it's not looking at the ripple effect that this border closure is causing. And part of that ripple effect is the inflation that we're talking about.
Thank you very much, Gbolahan. Sorry, I need to come in here. The reason I'm saying that is because it's well and good to read headlines like this, but the question we want to ask is at what cost?
Absolutely.
So you're earning 11 billion naira daily, but at what cost
is it?
And then the second thing is that last year, the border closure was meant to be for a certain period of time, and was said that it would be the end of January, where close to the end of February, we haven't heard any update yet. Are we looking at seeing this as a permanent situation, or are we looking to review in the next few months?
Well,
we haven't heard anything
It's
yet.
an interesting question, and the reason why they've shut the borders, actually, they said it was because of security reasons. Later on, we found out it was because of rice importation into the country. Then I mean, there were several reasons, actually. They said it was because of security reasons. Later on, we found out it was because of rice importation into the country. Then, I mean, there were several reasons that have been given. And what they've said is, what the Nigerian government has said is that they're in talks with the neighboring countries like Niger and Benin, Republic of Benin. And they've been in talks with them to see how they can form a joint task force in dealing with the goods and products that are coming through across the border. If it could be done properly and there could be better coordination to ensure that the Nigerian government are not getting ripped off in terms of generating revenue and with the number of items that are imported into the country. So, I mean, right now at the moment, they're yet to come to an agreement with the neighboring countries. And this effect of the border closure is being felt as far as Ghana too. But the other thing I wanted to talk about too is that, yes, fine, Nigerian government is generating 11 billion, but do we know the cost that is actually coming to importers into Nigeria? The customs, the port at the moment is heavily
on the port.
congested.
I was going to say that the facilities are still in a shambolic state.
Now,
if we're raising all this money, what's happening?
What are we doing with the money? I mean, it also raises a lot of questions as to how long it now takes for you to clear your consignment from the port. I mean, it used to take a few days, maybe 14 days, but now it's taking much longer because of the congestion. And we're not investing a lot in our infrastructure. But we're hoping that with this money that is being generated now, because it's one of those things that he mentioned, is that government is going to be investing heavily. So we're looking at seeing where the money that is being generated is going into over the next couple of months and years.
Thank you, Gbolahan. Zikolo on WhatsApp says inflation rate will continue to be on the increase as long as it close that border and food prices continue to increase. Forget the story that they now earn 11 billion naira per day. You can believe that at your own peril, he says. And then Cruz says, did you say Nigeria is now generating 11 billion naira daily from customs alone? That's $30.1 million per day. That's about 242 billion naira per month. Is this right? Remember, we're still trying to borrow money from the different sources in the world. That's a good point, Cruz. Thank you.
By the way, yesterday I realized that my regular meal, which I have every day at 12 o'clock, has increased by 50 naira. So, yes, this affects me too. Devoe, let's come back to you, shall we? So let's talk about the flight diversions that we've been recording lately. This is from the Daily Times newspaper. To probe fan and NAMA over non-installation of visibility equipment. The House of Reps on Tuesday directed its Committee on Aviation to investigate non-installation of the Instrument Landing System ILS and other supporting systems in airports across the country. Apparently, provision has been made for these equipments to be installed in about 7 or 8 airports across Nigeria. The Murtala Mohammed Airport has had its installed. However, its supporting systems like the runway lighting and all have not been installed, so this kind of like makes it not work optimally. So it all seems reactionary, quite frankly, that the reps are now coming out to say let's investigate now, because we all the issues with diversions from all through the holidays and now where we are. But Devo, your take.
Well, I'm not surprised that the reps are reacting. Remember, they're among the flying class, so I'm sure many of them and their wards have been diverted in what has been going on. It's been taking place for the past 1 week, about 6 days precisely, whereby flights inbound to Lagos and some of our other international airports are diverted to other West African countries like Ghana, Togo, and Lome, and Accra. Now, Accra suffering the worst because right now Accra is even congested due to the fact that flights into Nigeria have been diverted. And even on the local side, those traveling internally have also had cases of delay and all of that. Now, the reps have taken this up recently, and they've said that despite the 7.8 billion that was budgeted for the Category 3 instrument landing equipment for 7 of the airports, that why has nothing been done? Now, NAMA did say that they had installed within Lagos, but it wasn't functional because the additional runway lights and approach lights hadn't been installed. Likewise, the Cat 3 ILS calibration was yet to be done, and some of them were screaming that they've been on that issue for the past 3 months. Now, my problem here is that in as much as the reps are standing up for the interest of Nigerians and also the brand or corporate brand that's being tarnished because of this silliness, will they follow through? Will heads roll? Will there be consequences for this lack of confidence? Because the reps have stated that the agencies do report to the minister. The minister needs to speak. He needs to deal with the matter. I would expect to have heard from the minister, even if I haven't heard from the agencies who have been given reactionary positions. It's not good enough.
The minister has spoken from this day. The minister did give a statement. That's the Minister of Aviation, Senator Hadi Sika. He said that, or he has described the insinuation that the Federal Airport Authority, saying that they neither acquired or installed the system is akin to calling a dog a bad name. In summary, he said they did acquire it. They were in the process of installation when the weather conditions changed, so they had to halt. So it is available. And they've already started installing, but they didn't get to finish. That's what the minister said.
You see, the minister only supports what his own agencies have said, and that hasn't dealt with the situation. Unfortunately, we go through Hamatan perennially, meaning every year we're going to face this. If you knew you're going to go through this transition, there would have been some. Remember, before I told you, foresight and government, Mazino, don't go in the same statement. You allowed Nigeria to get here, and now you're giving excuses. Mr. Hadi Sarki, we're not buying that.
All right, thank you very much, Devoe. We have from Modukwe Sanda saying on YouTube, the Comptroller General's figures are extremely difficult to believe, particularly when you consider the government is still looking to borrow from World Bank and pensions and so on. Thank you very much. And then Shegun on WhatsApp says,
he says, did the airport ever have the same equipment since Hamatan is annual, or did the equipment just break down?
No, they Category 2, which is actually basic. It doesn't allow you to fly in non-visible conditions. So that was why for a long time people had pushed that our international airports should have the standard Category 3, which allows pilots to communicate with the landing gear without any sights.
Which can't work on its own because it needs to be supported with other installations as well. So it's an Ouroboros here. Cruz here. Is this Cruz? Yes. I think we can officially announce the House of Reps as an intelligent arm of the police since they're always investigating.
All right, talking about that, I think we have a few more investigations in the news this morning. On to our next story here. Gbolahan, I'll come to you for this. $750 million oil stolen in 2019, says NNPC. This statement was made by the group managing director of the NNPC, Malam Melek Yari, who disclosed this yesterday, decrying the growing activities of oil thieves and pirates, which he described as a threat to the operations of the corporation. In Naira terms, it's 272.6 billion Naira that was lost to oil theft in 2019 alone. In fact, some people might say that these figures are conservative, but please take us through the story.
I mean, the figures are rather alarming, just as you mentioned. It's a bit worrying to see that on a yearly basis, we seem to be losing a lot of money through oil theft and pipeline vandalisms every single year. And of course, I'll cast our minds back to just a few oil pipeline vandalism that was somewhere in Lagos. And of course, this erupted in a huge fire and gutted a lot of properties then. So this is something that has always been happening, and the NNPC has always looked into it, and they've also mentioned that they're going to be stepping up intelligence gathering in ensuring that they monitor the activities along the oil pipelines and ensure that they safeguard these pipelines to reduce all the vandalisms that we see. I mean, the Minister of the NNPC managing director did mention that a lot of all these losses that we encountering are usually as a result of the insecurity challenges that are along the Gulf of Guinea. Yeah. And of course, along the Gulf of Guinea, we have a lot of security challenges. There's been a lot of kidnappings that has happened. Yes. Of vessel seafarers. Just a few weeks ago, there were about 34 seafarers that were kidnapped. And Nigeria has one of the highest risk when it comes to along that coast, when it comes to vessels along that coast. And the question that will be asked is what efforts are being put in place when we're talking about security measures? How far have we gone in stemming this tide? And if I would answer that question, part of the challenges that we have is that a lot of all the security agencies sometimes are usually in collusion with most of all these smugglers. I mean, quite a lot of times we've heard stories and accounts as to areas where you're meant to have oil pipelines along that line being vandalized. And at the same time, you do have security operatives that are meant to be manning certain posts in certain areas. So it raises a lot of questions as to what are these guys doing there.
I want another question it raises, Gbolahan, before we move on to the next stories. We want to hear solutions. We want to hear the policies that are being, introduced to check these thefts. He doesn't seem to say this in this report. He just, again, highlights the problem that is obvious.
I mean, all what he has said is that they're going to be increasing the security apparatus along those areas. But then when you're talking about these security apparatus, they already do exist. Mm-hmm. So what more are you going to be doing to ensure that we really stem this vandalism and oil theft in the area? I mean, a lot needs to be done anyway. We're not doing enough because we keep on seeing this on a yearly basis.
Well, it's still on the subject of security. Let's move on to this story here from the Punch newspaper. Sacking service chiefs will threaten national security. National Unity says from the presidency. This was said on behalf of the presidency by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa. He said, and I want to quote him. He said, "Well, I don't think this sacking of chiefs is appropriate for this firm. You don't sack people like that. There are processes, and I believe that we are at the opportune time. These processes will be followed. We need everybody on board. We need a synergy within the intelligence community, within the military formations that will help fight this war." I see you smiling here, but what do you think?
I mean, this statement just invariably what we're saying is that the army isn't, or our security apparatus are not institutions. What I know about institutions is that when one man leaves, there should be somebody that should be able to step into those shoes and fill those shoes just exactly and continuity. But what the chief of staff is talking about now is alien to me. For him to tell me that you don't sack people simply because there are processes that should be followed, and sacking them would create a little bit of gaps. And I mean, it raises a lot of questions. And when we're talking about that, this is the Nigerian army, this is the Nigerian security force. If you were not sacking these people, invariably what you're saying is that they're doing a very good job. Are they doing a very good job at present? We know the security challenges that Nigeria is facing, and we know that this situation does not seem to be abating anytime soon. We've been having this situation of Boko Haram that has been going on for about 20 years now. And what he's saying is that, well, you don't stop or you don't sack the chief security officers in the middle of a security crisis. So what are we saying? Are we saying that these guys are still going to be left there up until the time that the war against Boko Haram ends, which we don't know when that is going to be coming to an end. It raises a lot of questions.
They're just making excuses.
It is an
Even the
excuse to me.
legitimacy of the service chiefs has elapsed. Why the presidency has not made that move? It is in tandem with their own processes. So it's on him, and I think people need to mount pressure on our reps to ensure that the presidency does the right thing.
I mean,
You have a school, a chain of security chiefs that have been trained to a certain level. Keeping someone on the same level in perpetuity is hindering our system.
Thank you very much. Now, Kingdom Reward, says that there is something about this service chief that only the presidency knows. And then Femi on WhatsApp has a long one for us.
He says, not supporting the government, but by your submission, we are familiar with weather, etc. He says, have you forgotten climate change? And many projects have been shifted based on the unprecedented changes. I know we can do better, but sometimes veracity is speculated upon. Finally, inflation is increasing, and this is expected. Unfortunately, the public is complicit because some of the things are not connected, just public exploitation.
All right. Thank you very much for your thoughts on that one, Femi. We move on to our next story, and this is criticism trailing the Accountant General of the Federation's inability to present EP's details for scrutiny. Guardian newspaper has this one. Devoe, please take us this story. It's in the news for a while now.
Yes.
The reluctance of the university staff to sign up to this, and now it's come under scrutiny by the House of Reps. Please take us to this.
Okay, this is just basically the House Committee on Public Accounts going through many of the ministries, departments, and agencies, and scrutinizing and investigating and probing in some cases. And there has been a lot of bad news up to this time because of the non-representation and unavailable information being given by many of the agencies. And in this case, the Accountant General was put in on call because of issues that were raised from the Auditor General, and he was unable to present information, especially on IPIS, which is about the 2.9 billion that was within it. He wanted details about it, and he was asked to bring it, and he still couldn't bring it, and he still wasn't present. He sent, I think there was a DG that was there representing him. Now, the reps chairman was very angry to this extent because he did mention that they were unable to produce it, and that even though they were given more time, and that they asked him also about the share of drop of Nigeria's funds from about 200 billion to 165 billion in 2015. As the Accountant General, he was still unable to mention. He said, that they were not able to produce the necessary documentation to support the facts. The 596 billion ecological fund, the reps asked him why he wasn't able to invest it to make money for Nigeria. He said, well, he still didn't have documentation for that, and that the CBN didn't allow them. Now, this is just one case. There was also the case of the Comptroller General, which they had warned ahead of time that when his time comes that he must be present. If you remember, the last time they had this, there was a big row when Buhari first came in, when the Comptroller General refused to show up for, well, he didn't come back because he first showed up in his, was it Mufti? Or what did he show up in?
He showed up in Mufti.
Yes, he showed up in Mufti, and they didn't buy that. So I think there's an issue here of the respect for our institutions. If at the end of the day, the National Assembly does not get the respect that it requires, because you should not have representatives whereby the nation is asking for probity and accountability on behalf of agencies that they have allocated funds to. What have they done with them? And if you cannot answer the questions, if you cannot make yourself present as the head of an institution, then you should not be there. So I hope, once again, that this House would take stiff penalties and recommendations for those who are not able to show up to answer hard questions on behalf of their
Thank you very
MDAs.
much, Devoe. Just as a way of mention, Senate plans no quota system varsity for Army. That's in the Punch newspaper if you'd like to read that. Thanks a lot for joining the conversation this morning. A big thanks to our analyst, Devoe Okorie at Devoe Okorie on Twitter, and Gbolahan and MrGQuest on Twitter. Next up, it's sports in the locker room with Tega.
The story on parties being